Welcome to a book discussion. The book under discussion today is titled Towards a Knowledge Society, New Identities in Emerging India. We are lucky to have with us the author, Professor Debal Singarai. Professor Singarai is a sociologist. He is a professor at Indira Gandhi National Open University in the School of Social Sciences. He is an erudite scholar who has written extensively. He's a recipient of many fellowships and awards. He's a Commonwealth Fellow, a visiting scholar at University of Alberta, Canada. He is also a visiting scholar at Maison de la Science in Paris. He's a recipient of Australian Government Endeavour Fellowship. He moved on to various other marginalized groups, which include tribes, the Dalits, and I think his more recent interest has been on the knowledge, the generation of knowledge and what it does to societies. So let me start asking him a few questions to have a better understanding about what exactly that we are moving towards, what are those transformations, and what is the book all about. Could you please explain to us very briefly what exactly constitutes a knowledge society?
Yeah, when we are talking about knowledge society, we are talking about exactly a society which is based on mass production, dissemination and exploitation of knowledge, not for the knowledge sake, but a category of the knowledge which will be used for the production of employment, production of wealth and other resources. So, it is a kind of a societal framework whose organization of production will be based on production of knowledge, modes of interaction, exercise of power, authority, domination, inculcation of identities will be based on one capacity to produce and exploit knowledge, and also to articulate a language of resistance based on one's capacity to have command over the knowledge. The point here is that it is not that earlier society they have not used knowledge. Agrarian society used knowledge, industrial society has used knowledge, but domain of the agrarian society has remained the land and the manual power. The domain of the industrial society has remained the industrial setup, the tool and machine. Here is the knowledge society that cultivate human mind, having enormous potential and infinite potential that can be exhausted to any end. The basic resource of the knowledge society, not land, not industrial set, it is the human being and their creative potential, how it can be exploited through the use of ICT, information communication technology, and an interrelated environment in which they can exchange the ideas and development of the ideas and dissemination of the ideas that can be used, as I told, for the generation of employment, wealth and social well-being.
Well, India is a highly hierarchical society and there are range of inequities on caste, class, ethnicity, religion and so on and so forth. I think your book does touch upon these inequities and you do mention that we have some continuations. Could you just throw a little light on this? I mean, what exactly are these inequities and how are they transforming themselves? Are they continuing in a knowledge society?
This is quite amazing. When we are talking about knowledge society, let us understand knowledge society is not isolated from the other amount of the society. It is taking shape within the pre-existing social order, which is part agrarian, part industrial. And take into consideration the agrarian society. Today, there is a phenomenal shift from the agrarian to other sector. If we take into consideration labor absorption, the agriculture earlier was absorbing more than 80% of the labor force. Now it has reduced, roughly around 49% of the labor force is absorbed in agriculture. In terms of GDP, since 70s, even mid 70s, we are getting around 70% to 75% of the GDP was coming from agriculture. Now we are getting only 18% of the GDP is coming from agriculture. It hardly means agriculture is withered away. Because till now 45% of the labor force engaged in agriculture and roughly around 75% of our people live in the villages and in the agrarian societies. That is one part. Second part, take into consideration the industry. Our industry, say 17 and 80s, roughly around 9% of our GDP was coming from industry. Now it is quite hyped. That is, we find around 21% of the GDP is coming from industry, but the labor force absorption has not been that much. Our labor force absorption has been roughly around 21 to 22%. But take into other segment that is the service sector. Now it produces roughly around 61% of the GDP of the country and absorb 28% of our labor force. So we find all these things are organically linked. But within this organically linked, what is important is that one segment is getting privileged or dominating over the other. What is having that dominating factor? The dominating factor is that gradual emergence of the service sector bypassing the industrial revolution. Even what the planning commission has already said, that we have missed the industrial revolution, but we can't afford to miss the knowledge revolution. So we will have to posit ourselves within the industrial revolution. Now here comes the question, when you are talking about the industrial revolution, can we dissociate ourselves from our past, from our inheritance, our traditional past? Traditionally we have told we are a knowledge based society, but unfortunately, as you correctly told, that we are a society highly hierarchical. Knowledge means getting education and learning was confined only among the higher caste. Unfortunately, the other caste, those who are the Antajawa and the Dalits and others, those who are deprived of the opportunities and capacity having an access to the educational opportunities. So if you are having not access of the educational opportunities, how can you get knowledge? Knowledge in that certified sense, which can be used and exploited for the generation of wealth and employment. So here there is a kind of a segregation. Now let us come to this other segment of the society, those who are getting education. Mostly our highly qualified and accepted educational institutions are in the urban centers, not in the rural center. So we find there is a gap between the urban areas, rural areas in terms of access to education, in terms of caste, Varna and other system access over education. You come even in the technology in the same way. We find the technology tractors, agricultural modernization, it is mostly among higher caste or the middle caste. It is not among the lower caste. They had remained mostly within this domain of manual laborer and others. So when we are talking about knowledge society, we find there has been a resurgence of the knowledge workers. Resurgence of the knowledge workers, those who are having enormous potential and have got the capacity to get access over the skill and knowledge, number one. Number two, having access over the modern technologies, especially ICT, information and communication technologies. And number three, they are the people, those who are the beneficiaries of development of the previous societies. So we have remained part agrarian, part industrial and part knowledge society. But interesting part is that the emergence of the knowledge society is privileging over the other. It has become a kind of a phenomenon that is controlling the movement and the progression of other element of the society, that is the agrarian component and the industrial component. Yeah.
So it has in more ways than others has impacted many sections of the societies.
Yeah.
So given this context, what are the ways in which the marginalized section is strategizing or even expressing their own situation or their identity?
Well, before directly answering this question, let me talk about the whole labor process in which the marginalized are posited today. When we are talking about the knowledge society, we have to understand the whole labor process and the labor engagement with this economic development. So we find in our society a kind of a knowledge workers and the non-knowledge workers. Okay. Within these knowledge workers, we are also having the old knowledge workers and also new knowledge workers. Those are the old knowledge workers, the teachers, the researchers, the lawyers, the doctors, the nurses and others, the old knowledge workers. Now we are having the new knowledge workers who are they are the IT workers, the BPO workers, the emerging entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, cultural entrepreneurs and also ICT entrepreneurs. So all varieties of the people there. So they are the core element of the knowledge society and the knowledge workers.
Would that include the entire service sector, in other words?
There is one segment of the service sector, because service sector is a big box within which we are having all varieties of the service provider, including the domestic servant to that of a high service provider. Okay. So one segment, those who are providing the knowledge component. Okay. So we are having the core knowledge worker there. Simultaneously within that, we are having, that is a category close to the knowledge worker. Directly they are not the core worker, but they are linked to the knowledge activities. How they are linked, take into consideration those who are providing security services, not the security person, security services, the labor service provider, the contractors and others. They are also one way or the other selling the information, getting the information. So, these are the people, they are linked to the core. Now, third sector we find they are the manual workers of various sort. Now, when the knowledge society is emerging, knowledge society emerging along with the two other co-constituent, one is the economic globalization, another is the penetration of ICTs. So, economic globalization and penetration of ICTs has brought in different kind of economic momentum, construction of the shopping mall, the roads, the railways, the metro station, the airways, everywhere work has increased. Where is the labor? Who are the labor? They are the people drawn from the rural areas to the urban areas. So, they are linked to the whole process of economic dynamics of the knowledge society as a manual worker. So, this manual worker usually provided not from the upper caste, they are coming from the lower caste and other ethnic groups. But simultaneously within that, what we find, a good segment of the people, even the upper caste, unable to engage themselves as a manual laborer in the rural areas, they are coming and engaging in the urban areas as a manual laborer. So, there is a kind of demolition of this hierarchical structure in the urban setup, but statistically not significant, but socially significant. They are playing that role. If you go to the upper structure, we find that marginalized communities representation in the managerial job of the as a knowledge worker is quite limited, because it is predominantly by the upper caste or the middle caste. OBCs are going close by. If we come to the near core areas, then we find it is mostly by the middle class, even the upper caste, but the lower caste, the domination of the lower caste remain in terms of the numerical representation. So, we find that the marginalized communities, they have got a space for occupational horizontal mobility. They are coming from the rural to the urban areas, maybe coming from one amount of social insecurity to another area of social insecurity, but they have got a space for occupational mobility that is horizontal. While for the upper caste, there has been a kind of a vertical social mobility. Maybe somebody is coming from a school teacher to join as a college lecturer, or somebody is coming from a from a farmer's family joining a BPO job. So, what we find, that kind of a space is already for the upper caste and the upwardly mobile section. So, marginality has remained, but what is important in this process is that they have been able to articulate a space for their mobility and multiple social option both in the rural and in the urban areas. So, that is providing that space to use their own knowledge. What Fukuyama talks about resurrection of traditional knowledge. What happens in a traditional society? Those subjugated communities were unable to use their knowledge. Whether those knowledge will be used or not, even those knowledge are used as a stigmatized knowledge. Take into consideration knowledge of a potter or a barber or any other communities. Within the rural setup, those are the stigmatized activities. But in an urban setup, when they are coming, those kind of a knowledge getting a space of expression through some value addition, opening a shelf, opening a boutique and so many other kind of a thing. So, knowledge society provide them that space of articulation of those subjugated, neglected knowledge to come in the forefront to be used with some value addition. Here lies the space of that contestation they are creating through their engagement with the knowledge society.
Well, I think that's an interesting phrase or term which Fukuyama has suggested, resurrection of traditional knowledge. I think it's interesting because my question for you is, in the Indian context, is it possible that certain occupations which are traditionally associated with caste groups, have they got any resurrection? Because as far as I know, maybe let's take the example of a Brahmin priest who might advertise his services on the net and use that as an additional way to circulate himself or make jobs available for himself. But what about, say, somebody who comes from a lower caste and who engages in a menial occupation, such as shoemaking. Has knowledge society with its attendant technologies, has that added any value to these?
Traditional occupation of those stigmatized occupation which we are talking about, so called stigmatized occupation, getting a space for value addition through those kind of a networking. While doing the field work, we find that is even from the village and also UP, some of the Berber boys coming to Delhi, taking the training in the Habib Center and trying to open a small entrepreneurs, open a boutique by their sister and a saloon for themselves. So what they find through this interactivity and modern technology, etc., making also they are having their website, book for your boutique or book for the saloon and hair cutting, etc., like this. So they are having a different pattern and they are having a value addition, body massage, spa and so many other kind of a thing. So what matter, what is helping them that way? One is that access over the information and communication technology. In agrarian society, tractor has remained confined only to the limited few. Thresher has remained confined only to the limited few. So is the land, all resources. Come to the industrial society, the tool techniques has been the property of the industrialist, the capitalist, the workers having no access. Here is the knowledge society. It has democratized those ICTs, information and communication technologies. They are making a kind of a value addition of their product and their capacity and widely circulated their potential. So they are emerging a local stigmatized boy emerging as an entrepreneur, maybe in an urban setup. Gradually he may be going back to the rural areas. Similarly, we find even the agricultural laborer, those who are coming from one segment shifting to another segment, what they are doing, they are also networking themselves. When an agricultural laborer or construction laborer coming to Delhi don't get job after 10:30 or 9:30 in Maidan Gadi Chowk, they are having mobile in their hand because another brother is standing in Malviya Nagar making a phone call, I have got an offer for a job for 10 people, come here with another 10 boys. So what they are using that network, using this network for employment and others. So dependency on other segment for employment, economic resources, others, it has minimized. So knowledge society what has produced, by disseminating knowledge, it has emerged to be one of the media for liberation. Rather, it is a practice. There is a practice for liberation, assertion of certain identities. Here lies the whole process of resurrection of this traditional knowledge. How this can be used, in what context, whether it will get a recognition. Wider society may not give an recognition, but recognition comes from within, out of its own work. The self-confidence, having our own occupation and profession, that is the knowledge society providing that kind of option, a multiple choice.
Another aspect of a post-industrial society or knowledge society is the fact that knowledge has no boundaries. It permeates, especially with internet. Now it is impossible to limit your range of discourse. So in this context, what is the nature of a nation state?
We are living in a state what we are talking about widely guided by the self-regulated market forces. What Karl Polanyi was talking about, the self-regulated market forces, it was coming and to give this laissez-faire economy, and it continued till the early part of 19th century. And that is the great transformation of human society. And then the state was gradually going away, it was sidelining, the market was trying to prevail over. What Karl Polanyi was talking about, there was a planning. But what the planning was trying to do, it was not trying to embed the market with the society getting embedded in the market. State is getting embedded in the market. Market is a wider platform. But a shift came perhaps after 1940s, this Great Depression, what Karl Polanyi was talking about, the great second transformation. And what he is talking about, in that phase, the welfare economy again came in. When the welfare economy came in, again the state came to the center stage, along with the whole formation of the socialist state and the Marxist state was taking place. State came into the forefront. So the relation between the state and the market has not been equal all through the ages. But we find another shift in the whole process of the welfare economy with the emergence of the neoliberal state and the structural adjustment program in 1990, especially in the Indian context. We find that a third great transformation has taken place. Rather, we are living a kind of a liberal economic regime, self-regulated market. While the market, many of the sociologists talk about that now the state is not a kind of a gardener state. A gardener state, what happens? A gardener, what he does? A gardener decide what are the things that to be weeded out, what are the things to be planted, how it is to be taken care of. But it is of a goalkeeper state. A goalkeeper state will stand, that is okay, what are the ball to be protected? You are at a receiving end, so you are not a proactive, you are a reactive. It is a reactive state, it will react the way market will react to it, what way market is reacting. So what is happening in that process, the welfare measures we are talking about, that is sidelined. Rather, it is not individual choice, it is the choice of the market. How the choice of the market is taking care of socialization, whole process of socialization, whole process of education. Say in our country, in 1950s, even 1970s, even 1980s, take into consideration, more than 90% of our total educational institution are the government run institution. Now today, more than 62% of our students coming out from the private educational institutions. 33% of the educational institutions belong to the private domain. So what is to be taught, what are not to be taught, and what is to be socialized, decided by the market. What you will consume, what will you will speak, it will be decided by the media. Your choice about the food, dress and motor car is not decided by you.
Yes.
It is decided what kind of need is constructed by the media and the market and the ICT. Always you will make one call, another call is free. Ultimately, no call is free.
Yes.
You are making more call, the economic scale of operation, more call you make means you are more contributing towards the multinational companies. Take into consideration, in our country, we are having earlier proud owner of one telephone, that is the MTNL. 90% of our telephone was owned by the government, rather 100%. Now you will look into 96% of our mobile market is from the private agencies. Landline, it is less than 30% owned by the government. Means 70% by the private penetrators. So the way we will consume, what we will construct, it will be decided by the media and the market. Here the state is widely withdrawing from various kind of activities, kind of engagement.
What is the hope? Where do you see the silver lining?
The hope is that knowledge itself can be conditioned. Knowledge itself can be conditioned because the human mind can be conditioned for long. Through media, through state, through well articulation, you can condition for a certain time. But that conditionality may not be long lasting because human mind always looks for liberation. Here is a knowledge society that is making people interlinked, making people try to know out of oneself. So that can be developed only by inculcating one's brain, that is one's human potential. What the knowledge society has done, it has provided in India, that's marginalized especially and wider population in general, three important things. One thing is that it has cultivated their mind to question each and every act of domination. That is number one. Number two, it has been able to give the multiple livelihood options. That option both in the rural areas and in the urban areas. In the rural areas, as you know, an agricultural laborer is not an isolated agricultural laborer. He is part-time a small shopkeeper, part-time a thela wala, part-time a rickshaw wala, part-time he be a milkman. So he is interacting with multiple employer over a period of time. Similarly, in the urban areas, even a migrant laborer, he is not simply a migrant construction laborer. Maybe a sabji wala, maybe a milkman, maybe a construction laborer, maybe trying to have a part-time job as a security person or a driver, getting a skill somewhere else, because the options are unlimited. So given that option. Number three, it has increased the interactivity. That interactivity is the strength. It is through the mobile phone and others. In our country now, more than 90% people having access over mobile phone, more than 13% of the people having access over internet. And one of the part is that India is emerging to be a young country. More than 56% of its population belong to the age group of below 19 years. Now that we are having children of economic liberalization, children of globalization, the children of economic liberalization, they are the electronic generation or the e-credo. They think differently,
The
they eat
digital
differently,
natives, yeah.
yes, they dream differently. They are having an image of an ideal India through which they will be able to work as a free citizen, talk in their own terms, and they will assert for their own identity. Here lies the hope of India, while perhaps the state and society will respect what Toffler is talking about. Toffler is talking about in this knowledge age. Even the commander does not expect a blind following from his soldiers. Rather, he is guided by the expertise of his soldier. Perhaps our country is to look into those kind of mindset, while they will try to be guided by the knowledge of ordinary soldiers, that is its ordinary citizen.
Very insightful, informative and analytical discussion on your book. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kiran. Thank you.